Hey everybody, this is JDGaming back today looking at some of the differences in the templates that Konami has used on Yu-Gi-Oh cards and taking more of an aesthetic type of view. So in just my normal everyday life, outside of Yu-Gi-Oh, I am a fairly artistic person. I like experiencing different forms of art, and within the game I've always looked not only at the artworks of the cards, but what has Konami been doing that makes the cards feel a bit different. Most notably, we just had Battles of Legend come out, and I looked at these cards and I thought, wow, if I hadn't played this game and seen the transition for some of these cards, I might think that these are fake, because there's something off about them, and I couldn't place what it was until my brother and I kind of looked at the cards in detail, and we realized, we noticed some things, not necessarily everything, but a lot of different traits that Konami has tweaked in the card's design that makes us feel something's a bit different. And looking at it, it seems to be what they're going to use, so I just wanted to go through kind of this fun historical trivia video that goes through how the cards have evolved over time and what we might think of coming up. So the first generation of card template that I want to discuss is Generation 1, as I'm calling it, and pretty much it's going to be the original official card game, or OCG's template. If you look specifically at monster cards, you have a special box very similar to the one that you see at the top for the name. You know, it has the light at the top and left borders, and then the shading at the bottom and right borders. It has the attack and defense values, and then we have our text box, very similar to what we see on our cards, but it's a lot smaller and condensed to the left side. This isn't a template that's used even in the OCG anymore. They actually discontinued it long ago, but this is our starting point, Generation 1 template. The Generation 2 template, as I like to call it, is going to be exemplified by the Witch of the Black Forest on the right. You can see how old of a card this is with all of that playware there. It's from Metal Raiders, which is from 2002, just a few months after Legend of Blue Eyes dropped, as the first set in the North American market, and following all the other non-OCG areas as well. And if we look here, we have the same type of name box. You still have the light on the top and left, and then the shadow on the bottom and right. But then if you look at the star spacing here, you'll see the stars are a lot more cramped between the box for the name and the artwork, as you see here. So you see a bit more space on the original OCG template. And then if you look at the top of the card art, the image starts at roughly the same spot, just a little bit higher on the TCG version, because again it is a little tighter there near the stars. But then if you follow downward, you can see how this is more of a square box, and then here we have more of a long rectangle, where this side is obviously taller than here. And you can see how here you have like a full couple, maybe 2 or 3 millimeters of extra image on the OCG Generation 1 template versus the TCG. And again, even if we move this thing up a millimeter to make it tighter near the stars, there's no way that it was this much of a difference going up between the two, because we would have started covering the stars. So there's a minor difference there. Continuing down the card, you'll see that the overall text box is fairly similar, and what I mean is, if you look, there isn't really like a shadow placed around the box that makes it pop and stand out. But what we obviously see, the attack and defense values have been added to the bottom of that text box with just an additional line, and that allows the text box to fill the entirety of the bottom segment of the card. Overall, we're seeing here, differences in the placement of the image box, the length of the image box, and then the redesign of these two into the single text box that we even see in the OCG cards of today. Generation 3's template actually started back in 2010, so just a couple years into the Synchro era, with the starter deck Duelist Toolbox, the third 5D structure deck. And essentially, they decided to clean up a lot of the template issues, as Konami saw, and kind of optimize it for a newer generation of duelists. So if we look here, I'm comparing the third generation template to the second generation we just saw. At the top, you see the Gen 3 border for the name starts at the very top of the card. There is a very small margin of maybe a millimeter from the top, whereas on the original card we had maybe like 2 millimeters. So it doesn't look like a big difference, but these are the types of things that our eyes catch even if we don't realize it, and it looks a lot fuller on the card, less dead space when compared to the second generation. Overall, the border itself looks fairly similar, no changes to the text or attribute symbols or anything. It may be a little tighter here for the stars. It actually feels a lot more flush with the bottom shaded border of the name, as well as was the image border, and then if we look at the image itself, it actually had some room to grow beyond the original. And what they actually did was, on top of making it, taller this way, if I actually stack the cards side to side, you'll see that the bottom image is actually ever so slightly wider, maybe like a ½ millimeter on each side of the card, and then that overall produces a bigger square image. If you compare it to the first generation card, though, it's not like this is like an elongated rectangular shape. It is more of a square, so it still preserves the overall TCG feel, but more image. And actually, on certain cards, you could see now that there is additional artwork that we did not have before. Again, the text box is still fairly similar at the bottom itself. It is a bit taller as well here, so you can see it does go a bit higher here. Main thing, though, is they wanted to optimize the coloring of it, make it a lot brighter, make it more visible, and overall it was made wider as well. So if I go and stack it this way again, you can see that the new third generation text box is ever so slightly wider, again about a ½ millimeter to a millimeter on each side, and that really goes and makes it, whoops, there, now you can see that. It makes it so that you can actually have a little extra space for the text so you can read that. As a brief aside, I just wanted to give an example of when the cards' artworks are cropped differently. So if you look here, we have a premium pack 4 version of the Dark Magician all the way back with its original Gen 1 template. Here we have, this is more of like a Gen 4 template here. But essentially, the big point is the circle here is cut off at the boundaries. We don't see the edge of the circle behind Dark Magician, whereas here, we could see the edge of the circle on all 4 sides if it's not covered by his costume or by him. You also see here that the staff is covering, part of the jewel is cut off by the edge. Here we see the entirety of the jewel and a little bit of extra. Here you could see 2.5 of these little rings around the wand or staff, and here we see all 3 of the rings and a little bit beyond that as well. So looking at cards like this, you could see there is more artwork available to the cards. How likely is it that, more than a decade between the release of these 2 cards, Konami actually went back and redrew them? I'm gonna say nil. It's most likely the exact same artwork that they had access to, and somewhere in their files they decided to crop out the images to make a card for the TCG or OCG and make them fit the template at the time. It's also cool if you think of certain cards as well. Another example would be Dark Magician Girl. If you look at the artwork that we just showed here from the Generation 1, that is pretty much what we think of for Dark Magician Girl's original artwork, but a few years ago they released a playmat that has more on the image than we originally may have thought. And whereas it's possible, yes, extensions to artworks can and do happen, I don't think it's very likely that it would have happened in Yu-Gi-Oh! More likely than not, based on this evidence here, Konami has all these original full arts on cards and simply chooses to crop them out. So that opens up the idea of, it'd be pretty interesting to see full art cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! As we do in other games like Pokemon as well. But, just a little fun side note. For Generation 4 template, we actually returned back to Dark Magician Girl in last year's movie pack, Dark Side of Dimensions. That's what it was. I almost said Dimensional Guardians, but that's a different terrible set that we no longer talk about anywhere. But essentially, if we look here, the biggest thing is that the name box at the top has been further optimized to the end of the card. So you can see here, it's a little bit wider on this side and a little bit wider on this side as well. So we overall have a much wider name box, fills more of that space. It pretty much starts at the same, top edge of the card with just like a millimeter or so from that black border. So that's overall the same, but extra room makes it so that we can have a bit more text running side to side. Stars are pretty much similar as well. There actually was somewhere in here, you could think of it as a 3.5, where the stars themselves looked slightly different. In Duelist Alliance, it was just like a complete star. You could see the entire shape of the star. And that I remember as a kid thinking, wow, Yu-Gi-Oh! Card stars are really hard to fake because they look so different than if you just put a yellow star on a red border. Look at your cards if you have them and you'll see what I mean. There's just a difference in the shading that makes them feel like Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. And the cards from Duelist Alliance through about a year and a half, basically the 2014 Megaton cards, if you think of those, ended up having like a totally different star. But you could see here we kind of missed that halfway point, mainly because the main difference there was just the star, so I didn't really bother showing that. Here then, image box is fairly similar as well, and then we have the text box pretty much remains unchanged. The main difference I noticed is they did revert the size of the text to a lot smaller font, despite the fact that they have like a bigger box. If you actually move this left and right here again, line that up, it actually got a bit wider. As you see, basically Konami is trying to always widen these boxes for text and make it so that there's more room available. Why they decided to increase the size of the text for things like Legendary Collection Yugioh's World and then revert it back to the small text, I'm not sure. Probably just has to do with a lot of the cards having, you know, crazy amounts of text these days, but overall the same thing. So Generation 5 is what we see here. Back to Witch of the Black Forest on the right from the most recent Battles of Legend Light's Revenge set, and there are so many things that just feel different between these two cards. Like, if you handle them especially, it's a bit difficult to show on camera, but like, it's some of their choices in like the foiling and stuff. You know, we've never had like a ultimate or gold type of card that was just a pure ultra, you know, that actually had the foil attribute symbol, level stars, and all of that. So, you know, there was already that felt a bit different, but even if you accept that, you know, the coloring is a bit different. Yeah, there's that, but there are actually some template differences here as well. So if you look, first of all, one thing I noticed is that the box at the top is produced differently, whereas here you can see even through the Gen 4 card, the top of the name box for Dark Magician Girl felt kind of like a light source kind of hitting it from the left, and then a natural shadow on the bottom right. But if you look at the box for Witch of the Black Forest here, it looks a lot bolder than the Gen 4 versions of the card, and the reason is they actually changed how it looks. I like to describe it kind of as if you open up like a computer, you know, like Microsoft stuff will have like the, you know, square box pop up with like some sort of warning and you can check it or whatever. Well, it's like that, where you see that it does have a lighter color white on the top and left and a darker color that represents shadow on the bottom and right, but try comparing those two. This doesn't look like light hitting this anymore. It looks like it's intentionally solid white and solid black, or I guess, you know, an off-white and kind of a gray. But my point is, this feels more like a light source here. This feels more like they just decided we're going to go and create this solid rectangle here. And that's really what threw me off here. It's like, this has this subtlety, this has kind of this rigidity, and if you look forward going into the Link monsters, you see all those cool little hexagons. That's all cool for design, kind of like the Xyz monsters having stars, but they're also continuing this solid type of rectangle box for their card names. So that felt really different, and that's one of the things that really popped out to me. The card portions here, like the image and especially the text box at the bottom, actually have a noticeable amount of shading around them as well. Any of you who have either played old school Pokemon TCG, like with base set, or have just heard about the legendary Shadowless Charizard, will know kind of what I'm talking about here. If you look even through the Gen 4 cards at your text box at the bottom, you won't see a serious amount of shading. There's a little bit there, you know, it kind of separates it from the background. But if you look at the new card, there is shading all around the text box, especially on the bottom right and the bottom here, and that really makes that pop out, almost like there is this 3D type of image effect going on. My brother likened it to, you know, it looks like the newer cards are trying to make everything stand out more, almost like it's a pyramid, because, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh is supposed to be based on this Egyptian type story, even if it is all through fiction that's happening. But we're actually starting to see, by creating more shading around all of the key pieces of the card, we start seeing things are layered more. They're coming towards us, and we start noticing, okay, the lack of subtlety is the big difference that's really making us feel, you know, these cards are a bit different. There's something off about them. Overall, if you look at the placement of the boxes and everything, there's not a big change at all. I mean, the name box is pretty much starting at the same height. It's about the same width. Image is about the same as well. They line up. Text box as well. So I was like, you know, they didn't change anything, so what's the difference? The difference is that subtlety is gone. It's more of a in-your-face popping thing. And really, if you're looking at this card and you hadn't played Yu-Gi-Oh before, I think that's fairly cool because it has this crisp presentation to it. And looking at the Link monsters, it looks like it's something that's going to be preserved going forward. It is an official new template that will be used. I can't really show it on camera because it's impossible to show at that resolution. Actually, you can see right here, right now. Here, you see those little specks in the gold sticker. So first ed stickers obviously always have a gold stamp here. But if you look here, you see little stars. I don't recall ever seeing these stars before. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Battles of Legend Light's Revenge is the first set, or at least one of the first sets, because you know, there are dimensional guardians and things we can't talk about that actually have a star print in the sticker on top of our Millennium Eye symbol and the Yugioh symbol as well. So they added an extra layer of defense. Maybe that's to try and prevent counterfeiting. I'm not certain of the origin of that. I believe this is the first time that they're using it, but it was still something cool to notice that, you know, after all these years, Konami's still innovating all these little differences in the card's aesthetics. And again, the big theme of today is try taking a look at your cards. You know, the artworks are really cool and all that, but over time they do make slight changes, and you know, if you ever feel something's off, you might discover something pretty cool by looking at this. But that's pretty much it for everything that I have here. Let me know what you think of these down in the comments below, and if you caught anything that I didn't hear. You know, this is all just personal research and observation, very minimal research really. Most of it was just observation over the years, because I guess it's just which is what I do. It's what I am as a person, you know, just observant. I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. You know, maybe we can get a discussion going for, you know, reasonings why people do or don't notice this, reasons why Konami may have changed certain things, and, you know, just talk about some stuff that I might not have noticed, because I think that'd be cool as well. So thanks, guys. This is JD Gaming. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.